feel your max with Brooks Running and the all-new Ghost Max 2. They're the shoes you deserve, designed to streamline your stride and help protect your body. Treat yourself to feel-good landings on an ultra-high stack of super comfy nitrogen-infused cushion that takes the edge off every step, every day. The Brooks Ghost Max 2. You know, technically, they're a form of self-care. Brooks, let's run there. Head to brooksrunning.com to learn more.
Today on CityCast Houston, as local media outlets struggle with the changing media landscape, innovative new platforms are presenting themselves as solutions to fill the local coverage gaps. But not all innovations are necessarily good, especially during election season. Enter Pink Slime Journalism. Investigative reporter Stephen Monticelli is joining me to explain what is Pink Slime Journalism and how it could impact the election. It's Monday, October 7th. I'm Rahil Ramzan-Ali, and here's what Houston's talking about. Hey, Stephen, what's up, man? Happy Monday. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Rahil.
I want to jump right into this because I am so confused about what is happening here with Pink Slime Journalism. So first of all, what is Pink Slime Journalism?
So Pink Slime Journalism is a pejorative term for a style of what you could call sensationalist or, frankly, unethical journalism, where publications pretend to be locally rooted and do objective, independent reporting, but in reality are basically paid partisan PR operations. And this phenomenon has really taken root as local journalism has declined over the past decade, where there's this major gap in local news coverage, leaving an opportunity for, a little more pernicious work to have its effect locally.
Stephen, why are they called Pink Slime?
Great question. So it is adopting the term that came out of some writing around the production of processed meat and the use of fillers in processed meat. A lot of this stuff looks normal, but in reality are the filler for the real stuff. And they puff it up to make it seem like it's, real stuff. But in reality, there's a lot of other additives in there that aren't real. So get your meat and your news sourced locally and get to know the people who produce it. Because otherwise you don't know what's going into it along the manufacturing process.
And how do we know if we're looking at a site, right? We're browsing the web and we're like, okay, this is an interesting story. We go to this website. How do we know that this website is Pink Slime Journalism?
Most legitimate journalistic websites will have staff pages. They will, have a history of the publication. It'll be easy to figure out who owns it or where the money's coming from, those sorts of things. With Pink Slime websites, that's not always the case. And furthermore, they have some telltale signs, obviously, that you can find by just looking at them. And so the most notorious merchant of Pink Slime is this businessman named Brian Timpone, who operates this network of companies that have a variety of different names. But the most notorious one that you'll see often is Metric Media. And so if you're seeing a website pop up in your neck of the woods, it doesn't seem familiar to you, you've never maybe heard of it, but it's reporting on something that's kind of sensational, you should try to find if they have terms of service or a privacy policy, because I'm looking at one right now. It's called the Dallas City Wire. If you pop open the privacy policy page, it says Metric Media, LLC, is a Delaware limited liability company that owns Dallas City Wire. So you should just do some basic research. If it's not a long-standing organization that you're familiar with, you shouldn't just take the reporting at face value, particularly if it's around an election season.
Gotcha. And these sites, it sounds like they just pop up, and the reporting comes from where?
Great question. So it can depend on the site. But largely speaking, these websites do not have local reporters. They might have real people writing these articles, but they could be located somewhere else. They could even be located overseas. And the content they produce is low quality in the sense that they're not really, relying on local sourcing. They're not telling deeper stories. They're just kind of creating this appearance of local journalism, which is the context within which these more partisan messages emerge.
Okay, so are the left and the right both using this? Because you brought up partisan twice already. Is one side using it more than the other?
So there is some good reporting on this question. And I think we would be wrong to say that, more liberally minded people haven't tried to do some of this. And there are some good examples of this written about. But by and large, the majority of this is coming from the right wing.
You brought up regular journalism, right? And there are legacy sites, like for us here locally, of course, the Houston Chronicle, Chron.com has become a source, Houston Public Media. You just trust them out the gate, right? And that's just kind of how it works. But should readers be digging more into these sites as well? Like, I'm kind of confused because I understand what you're saying, but we just kind of go about our business, right? Like, we don't investigate much as consumers.
Right. So, I think it's good to have that level of skepticism with any source of information, any sort of media. And I think the reality is that all media has a perspective and a bias, but not all media is upfront about that. We trust local journalism typically because local journalism has required truthfulness in order to survive. If you built a reputation for spreading lies and you relied on local advertising dollars, you could take a serious hit if you were to deceive your audience or your advertisers. These days, these pink slime institutions are actually quite insulated from those sorts of pressures because they don't really rely on advertising dollars and they don't rely on popular subscription models. They rely on large payments from right-wing donors. And so it doesn't really matter if they take this trust hit. And in fact, they are strategically trying to, sort of ride the coattails of the trust that local journalism has worked so hard to establish.
You mentioned that they're just not factually correct at times, right? Is there a headline or story that jumped to mind immediately for our listeners that you could tell them, like, okay, here's how Pink Slime Journalism reported this, when actually here are the facts?
Yeah, so there are a few examples. Some that I have thought about recently and are on top of mind for me are claims around election fraud, for example. There have been a few different articles published in a particular website. But if you just simply Google pink slime journalism plagiarism, for example, you'll find plenty of examples of how they are basically just stealing other people's work. You can also find examples of them pushing, as I mentioned, very salacious claims around voter fraud that aren't true, as well as salacious claims around hot button topics like, CRT, bathroom access in schools, those sorts of things.
Okay, so are legacy media sites accidentally or even on purpose sourcing these pink slime journalism websites? Because you wrote about this in March that Gannett Media actually use pink slime related sourcing, right?
That is really the big problem with this quote unquote pink slime journalism. Because people ask questions all the time about why are you writing about this? Why does it matter? Are people actually reading this? Is it having some sort of impact? And there are some metrics to suggest people aren't necessarily reading these websites like a lot. But what is happening is that their reporting does get picked up and spread. And it creates what people in the media criticism industry will sometimes call a surround sound effect, where it seems like the same sort of messaging is coming from all these different sources, but in reality, it's actually a coordinated PR campaign that is pushing a particular message. And so that is certainly a problem. And then what you're referencing that I wrote about for Harvard's Neiman report in March is that in some instances, the companies that are behind this pink slime have been contracted to produce content for mainstream outlets.
On some of these websites, I was browsing around before our conversation, and I even saw like Google ads on there. Is Google stepping in and saying, no, we're not doing business with this? Or do they not know? Do they not care? Are other advertisers pulling out or anything like that?
I used to work for Google for nearly 4 years, and I've been very disappointed to see the quality of search go down so dramatically over the past several years. And that problem extends to not just search, but ad placements, as well as the distribution of articles through the Google News product. Because in many instances, indeed, ads are being placed and stories are being distributed through Google News. And the source of those stories where those ads are placed or the stories that are being distributed, it's this pink slime network. And it's tricky, right? Because we live in a country where we have the First Amendment, which is amazing. It allows me to do my work. It allows you to do your work. It gives us so many great protections. But the flip side of that is we don't have any sort of credentialing in journalism. So there's no tried and true set of ethics. There's no boundaries that you can cross that will result in you losing some sort of license to publish or broadcast or what have you. And so we do live in this wild west where when institutions like Google don't create their own ethical standards and enforce them, they may be aiding and abetting this sort of manipulation that we're seeing.
According to a map put out by Iffy.News, there are 79 pink slime sites in Texas alone, and that seems like it's very high. How are those sites impacting Houston and Texas in general, especially as you mentioned, we are in an election year. We are in the thick of it right now with national, state, and local elections.
One way we could point to how this is impacting us is the major donor for the Republican Party right now, Tim Dunn, the most significant donor who has been pushing his money to basically back Christian nationalism in the state. He's been connected to this network of pink slime websites. And I've done a little bit of reporting, and others have done some reporting about how you can see there's this pattern of pushing pro-oil talking points or anti-clean energy talking points in pink slime papers, and how these talking points are coming from, like right-wing think tanks that Dunn funds, or they're coming from basically clearly partisan sources, and they're distributing these things out. It's hard for us to, really pinpoint how is this impacting the election, or how is it, moving the needle, and whether it's the defining factor. But it is a part of a broader strategy for disseminating messages, for getting them out there, and for creating this effect where it seems like it's coming from a bunch of different sources, when in reality it's highly coordinated and coming from largely, a small number of funders who have clear political agendas.
I'm not sure if you have the research on this or not, but looking at it like from the impact of journalism, yes, it's very bad, right? It's kind of blurring the lines. It's not fair to the reader at times. But are politicians citing these at speeches or on their websites? How is that being used? Because as a conspiracy theorist, or not even a conspiracy theory, I mean, it's happening. It seems like it's like, okay, here are the talking points. Here's this website that you can source and cite if somebody questions it. And now we've got this greater message going out, and everyone just goes, oh, yeah, it is cited.
Yeah, absolutely. So, case study of this, which is a very particularly interesting case for a number of reasons, is what's going on here in Dallas, where we have this relatively new, only since 2021, website called the Dallas Express, which early on was linked in numerous ways to Metric Media and this broader network, using the same writers, same technology stack, templates, all this stuff. And it was funded, it is still being funded by one major Republican donor. And he created this website in early 2021. And since then has published a large number of articles citing these political advocacy groups that currently no one knows who's funding them, but I have a good feeling that we'll be learning who's funding them very soon. And this website has pushed out all these articles that we've seen our mayor, who switched from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party, share them on his Twitter. We've seen our conservative city council person sharing them on their Twitter. And they're getting cited in conservative circles, primarily speaking. And they've even, in retaliation for my reporting on these sorts of things, they've even published articles citing these bogus advocacy groups, claiming that I and other journalists are racist for basically no reason. I mean, the retaliation is quite clear. And I should also note that website, they tried to sue me. They did sue me and a local Black-owned newspaper that I was reporting for at the time for writing about their website. And we won that case.
Why is this happening right now? I know you've been reporting on this for a while, but it's really picked up here recently. Why now?
Well, what month is it? It's October. And what happens next month? We are less than a month away. Mm-hmm. And it is, always the case that these sorts of operations really pick up steam during these critical times. But you don't just launch these websites the month before the election. You launch them years in advance in order to kind of create the appearance that they're legit and they have this track record of reporting, so that whenever the time is right, they can start disseminating particular messages around particular issues.
Researching schools for my kids was important to me and my wife, and if you're currently doing that, then I have another option in education beyond the traditional offerings for your family. Check out The Village School. It was named a top 20 best private school in America by Niche.com and offers pre-K through 12th grade. The Village School curriculum is rigorous and focuses on STEAM. That's a combination of science, technology, math, and the arts, so students are prepared to accomplish great things in their personal journeys. Want to see if the Village School is right for you and your student? Join them on November 8th at 9 a.m. for their open house, where you can tour the campus, meet with faculty, and see how you fit into their incredibly diverse community that has more than 90 countries represented. Register for the open house at thevillageschool.com. Again, their open house is on November 8th, and you can register at thevillageschool.com. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Let's talk about your mental health. October is a season for wearing masks and costumes, but some of us feel like we wear a mask and hide more often than we want to, whether it's at work, with friends, or around our family. But therapy can help you learn to accept all parts of yourself, so you can take off that emotional mask. I tried therapy earlier this year to help learn positive coping skills and to prepare myself emotionally for anything life throws at me. Remember, therapy isn't just for those who've experienced major trauma. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, so it's meant to be convenient and flexible. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Take off the mask with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/CityCast today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/CityCast.
Hi, this is David Plotz of CityCast. Have you thought about a gift for yourself this year? One that has the power to help you grow and learn and become a better version of yourself? Give yourself the gift of language by getting Babbel. With quick 10-minute lessons handcrafted by language experts, Babbel gets you talking a new language in 3 weeks, because talking is the key to really knowing a language. And that's how Babbel approaches it. It's designed for real conversation. So I have a trip to France planned with my girlfriend. Was it inspired by the Olympics? Yes, it was. And it's given me the chance to revive my old high school French. And it's so fun to catch back up with the vocabulary I'd forgotten, to remember all the food. For example, I'm in a lesson on ingredients, so I'm going to make crepes with butter and sugar. Avec sucre et de beurre salé, on va se régaler. We're going to have a feast. They learned this great new French expression too. J'en ai l'eau à la bouche. That means I have water in the mouth. That means it's mouth watering. Love it. Love French. Anyway, Babbel gets you talking, and studies from Yale and Michigan State University and other leading universities prove that it works. So here is a special holiday deal for CityCast listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for CityCast listeners at babbel.com/CityCast. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/CityCast, spelled BABBEL.com/CityCast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Stephen, I'm confused how these websites work. I'm on this website right now called HoustonDaily.com, and in their About section, it says they're published by Pipeline Advisors, LLC, which is a private company that is investing to rebuild community news across the country. And I'm looking at some of these headlines, and, they look innocent enough, like there's nothing leaning it towards one political side or the other. But is that how they bait you in? Like most of it looks real, and then there's a story in there that might not be based on facts?
Great question. So Pipeline Media is actually one of the companies Brian Timpone controls. It is affiliated with the Metric Media Network. And so a part of the confusion here is that there's this proliferation of companies that they've set up to act as portions of this network. And so it can be a little confusing to track it all back together if you're not highly familiar with it. But to answer your other point, yes, that's exactly the point. It's to create the appearance of sort of innocuous coverage on a more regular basis and then slip in these particularly partisan or sensationalist or biased stories as, the real purpose of this. And Pipeline Media is the company that Tim Dunn, the biggest right-wing donor in the state, was affiliated with. So yes, I do think really the point is to grift off the trust that local media has established, because local media is on average more trusted than national media by its readers. Fill the gap that has been created as local media has fallen apart and newspapers have closed. And then, exploit those two things to put out these messages in very targeted ways around election seasons or in the lead up to election seasons, to make particular points and to create the appearance that these messages are widely, concerning to people and are being talked about, when in fact they may only concern a very small number of people and aren't being widely talked about.
Let's talk about solutions. Is there a solution to fix this problem if it is considered a big enough problem on a national stage or for government officials? Because it sounds like politicians are benefiting from these networked sites, right? What is the solution here?
It's a really good question. I think the only real solution here is for local news to be heavily reinvested in all across the United States. And I don't think there's a silver bullet solution for that. People need to find new business models. Investors and donors need to come to the plate. And maybe we even need to consider at a state by state level or at a national level, adopting some sort of policy like they have in some European nations, such as, in particular Norway, where we use tax dollars to subsidize the production of local journalism. And that's done in a way in Norway, for example, where basically everybody is given kind of like an amount of money. Like by everybody, I mean all of the publications are given money from the government based on how many subscribers they can get. So it incentivizes them to actually grow their subscriber bases and really, cater to their audiences. And then the government can help cover, some additional cost and make it sustainable during this time of, advertisements being so different than they were back in the golden age of journalism.
Wow.
So, we can't get rid of digital advertising. We can't go back to the way things were. All we can do is figure out how do we refund journalism. And I think we need to make that argument on the basis of journalism being an essential part of a functional democracy. You can't have a functional democracy if you don't have diverse and well-funded journalism.
Okay, since you brought up funding, I've always had a problem with this, right? Local journalism, local TV stations. I've worked at local radio stations, and it kind of gets murky. You're not supposed to be influenced by advertising dollars, but when you have every other commercial on every single TV station is a political ad during this season, it gets murky for me as a viewer. Like, okay, you're telling me you are unbiased, but you also have a lot of political dollars coming in during the election cycle. How is this different, right? Like, this is just somebody else funding it, and you're getting funded by political dollars on local journalism levels as well. So I've always had a hard time with that.
Right. Well, so I think we need to find a way to move journalism away from being reliant on purely advertising or purely the largesse of wealthy people, and move it towards a model where journalism is catering to its audience. And some people might say, oh, well, then you're only giving the audience what they want. And that could be a bad incentive as well. And I think ultimately, every outlet wants readers. Every outlet wants people to read their stuff. And it's not actually a bad thing for there to be more outlets that have a variety of different viewpoints, and then for people to subscribe to the ones that they prefer. That's like a market solution that has a little bit of government assistance built into it. And it seems to work because in the capital of Norway, there's like an abundance of news outlets. There's everything from the party organ of the Christian right-wing political party to like a super left-wing paper that's name translates to class struggle, to everything in between. Like, that's a good thing. That means that there's healthy discourse. And if people are dissatisfied with the coverage of the places they're subscribing to, they can move their dollars, they can move their eyeballs somewhere else. I think the real problem is that we're all competing for ad dollars. We're all competing for eyeballs. And that money can really only stretch so far, especially when everybody's used to content being free. So we have to get to a place where people will give some money as a signification of their interest in something, but that we can also hopefully get some other sorts of funding to actually make it sustainable. Because everybody passing around the same $2 on Patreon isn't going to solve the problem.
That is so interesting. Okay, final question, Stephen. Are there any other websites that we should be aware of? Because again, we are in the thick of it. The election is coming up. So, we're all going to be researching our news. We know about pink slime journalism now. We all know about how social media can play a role in elections as well. But anything else?
I wouldn't say there's any particular websites you need to look out for, but I think there's a practice that you should adopt as you get closer to the election season, which is if you see some coverage coming from some place and you've never heard of it, just do a few Google searches. Just simple things like name of publication bias, name of publication fact check, name of publication funding. Do those basic things, and that will help you sift through the nonsense. Because I could say, go look at the list of over 1,000 pink slime sites, consult that. Stuff might not be on there, but somebody may have already covered it elsewhere and done your homework for you. That's generally the case. So just, don't be super lazy. If you hear about something that seems like it's, too good to be true, or maybe too ridiculous to be true, just, use your critical thinking skills and don't let yourself be led around by the nose.
Stephen, thank you so much for joining us. This was so interesting and educational. I appreciate you joining us here on CityCast Houston.
Hey, thanks for having me.
That was Stephen Monticelli. You can read more about his findings on Pink Slime Journalism with the link in our show notes. And speaking of the upcoming general election, today is the last day to register to vote in Texas, so I've included a link about all the information you or somebody else might need to register in our show notes. And I definitely learned something new today, so if you did as well, please share this episode with 3 of your friends and drop us a rating and review wherever you're listening to us right now. And you can also subscribe to Hey Houston, which is our daily newsletter where you'll get Houston happenings and news in your inbox every morning for free. Check it out. That will do it for today. I'm Raheel Ramzanali. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something new. Enter Pink Slime Journalism. Enter Pink Slime Journalism. Enter Pink Slime Journalism. Enter Pink Slime Journalism.